On paper, my life probably looks like I've been operating in a very high efficiency, high rational mode for a long time. I spent about a decade working in content strategy and senior leadership roles at high pressure companies like Disney Company, Fox Networks Group, DreamWorks Animation, Sony Pictures, and ByteDance, the parent company of TikTok. Then, starting in 2018, I became an entrepreneur. I built my own startup from scratch, raised a $5 million seed round, and managed a Beijing-based engineering team alongside a US-based growth and operation team, mostly remotely because of the pandemic. By conventional standards, someone with a background like this is supposed to strong-willed, disciplined, logically sharp, and emotionally resilient. That's what it looks like from the outside. But over the past few years, something became increasingly clear to me. What actually controls my behavior isn't that capable, rational version of myself. It's a set of automatic scripts running quietly in my brain. Neuroscience has a name for this. It's called the default mode network, or DMN. In Buddhism, it's described as the continuous flow of unexamined thoughts. In Taoism, it's described as the habit of going along with everyone else. Well, I just call it what it feels like, the devil that lives inside every human brain. In this video, I'd like to unpack this devil and talk about what it actually is, how it quietly drains your energy and blocks creativity, and why Buddhist and Taoist traditions more than 2,000 years ago already understood how this works, and how I personally began to see it, disarm it, and take back control of my own life through startups, binge eatings, and long-term stress. So at the final part of the video, I will share the concrete ways of dancing with the devil, things I've tested repeatedly in real life that works. The goal isn't just to understand what's happening in your head, it's to leave you with a concrete method you can actually use in your daily life. So if this is something you've been struggling with too, I hope you'll stay with me until the end. The default mode network. You think you are resting, but your brain is secretly running a disaster movie. Neuroscience has found something that's actually very counterintuitive. When you think you're doing nothing, such as spacing out, daydreaming, replaying memories, or imagining the future, a specific network in your brain becomes highly active. This is what neuroscientists call the default mode network, or DMN. What's even more surprising is how much energy it uses. During these so-called resting moments, the DMN can consume around 60 to 80% of your brain's energy. So while you think you are resting, your brain is actually working hard in the background, slowly draining your mental battery. Here's a simpler way to picture it. It's like you barely touch your cell phone all day, but when you finally check it, the battery is already down to 50%. Nothing obvious was happening, but background apps were running the whole time. That's basically how the DMN works. The DMN is the part of your mind that keeps talking about you. It asks questions like, who am I? Am I good enough? How do I compete to other people? It replays the past, that awkward thing you said in the meeting, a moment your brain just won't let go of. And it jumps into the future too, running endless what-if scenarios. What if I lose my job? What if something happened to my child? It's like your mind is constantly playing disaster scenes that haven't actually happened again and again in your head. To be fair, this system once served a real purpose. For our ancestors, this kind of mental scanning helped them survive. When they were resting in caves, their brain stayed alert. What if there is predator nearby? What if the water runs out? Running through these possibilities increased their chance of staying alive. But today, real physical threats are rare. So when there's no trigger to worry about, the DMN doesn't shut down. It turns inward, and it starts working against you. Here's what that looks like in real life. Nothing is actually wrong. You are safe, but your mind keeps telling you you are not enough. The day is over, the work is done, and instead of resting, your brain starts replaying everything you think you did wrong. Your child spills a glass of water, and in a split second, your mind jumps to, am I a bad mother? Research shows this very consistently. People are less happy when their minds are constantly wondering. A highly active DMN is linked to higher anxiety, depression, self-blame, and self-doubt. So when you say, I can't stop overthinking, or I'm just someone who worries a lot, that's not a personality flaw. That's the default setting of the DMN, an automatic mental program running in the background. Before we go further, pause for a moment. If any of these moments felt familiar, replaying conversations, doubting yourself, worrying about your child, or mentally attacking yourself after the day is over, write this sentence in the comments. I see the script running. Writing this isn't about changing anything yet. It's simply a way to shift your position. Instead of being completely inside the thought, you are starting to notice how your mind is operating in real time. And that moment of noticing is where real change begins. Your brain reacts to imagined danger as if it were real. Here's something important to understand. To your brain, imagined danger often feels just as real as actual danger. When people picture something frightening, like a spider crawling toward them, or they expect a sound that reminds them of a past of shock, the brain reacts the same way. The body tightens up, the heart speeds up. You might start sweating, even though nothing is actually happening. So when the default mode network keeps replaying scary scenarios in your head, your body still pays the price. Stress hormones are released, energy is burned, tension builds up. That's why so many people feel anxious all the time, even though their lives are relatively safe and stable. Their brains are reacting to things that exist only in imagination. From an energy point of view, this is a huge drain. Energy that could have gone to creating, learning, connecting to others, or simply enjoying life gets put into worrying about threats that aren't even real. Why you're stuck. Let's talk about what this does to your creativity. When the default mode network is running strong, your brain shifts into survival mode. Everything becomes about staying safe. The question in your head sounds like this: how do I avoid messing up? How do I make sure I don't fall behind? How do I protect myself? In that state, your brain naturally chooses the safest option. It sticks to what it already knows. It avoids new ideas because new ideas feel risky. Instead of asking, what do I actually want to make? The louder question becomes, what will people think of me? And that's the opposite of how creativity works. Creativity needs room for uncertainty. It needs you to try things that might fail. It needs you to be present, not constantly evaluating yourself. So you might say, I want to do something creative, but almost immediately your mind jumps in with, that's not practical. What if no one cares? Can I really make money from this? It's like pressing the gas and the brake at the same time. You use up a lot of energy and you don't actually move forward. My red bean cake moment. Let me share with you a very personal story. This was one of the first times I clearly saw the default mode network in action in my life. After I raised the $5 million seed round for my startup in 2022, I entered one of the most intense periods of my life. I stayed in Beijing to manage our engineering team in person while handling US operations remotely. It was during the peak of the pandemic. Travel was frozen. I could not see my husband or my 4-year-old son for an entire year. Every day, on my way to the office, I passed the same bakery shop. I had already decided I wasn't going to eat sweets. I wanted to control my weight. And yet, almost every day, I walked in the shop and bought a red bean cake. At the time, I even felt kind of proud of it. I told myself, wow, my subconscious must be really powerful. It knew what I truly needed and overrode my conscious decision. Looking back now, I see it very differently. It wasn't a deep message from my subconscious. It was just my brain running a comfort routine. I was overwhelmed that year, so my system looked for quick relief. Sugar and fat gave a fast dopamine hit. Then it was back to work, back to stress. I wasn't really choosing the red bean cake. I was being carried by a program. I thought it was me, but it was just something running on autopilot. That was the first time I sensed something important. There was an auto-running me, and that version of me didn't care about my intentions or my plans. Later on, as I started practicing awareness, meditation, energy tracking, and gratitude, this pattern became impossible to miss. This same kind of moment showed up again and again, not just with food, but with emotional outbursts, overworking, and long loops of guilt and self-blame. Every time, it was the same thing running quietly in the background. If you've noticed something like this in your own life, maybe with scrolling, working too much, people-pleasing, or beating yourself up, write this sentence in the comments. I see the script running. Writing it down helps your brain recognize that what just happened was just an automatic pattern, not a personal failure. Which brings us to the real question. How do we wake up from the autopilot and put creativity back in the driver's seat? This is where the science gets interesting, the triple breakthrough of flow states. Here's the hopeful part. Scientists have found that when an experienced jazz musician enters deep improvisation, what we actually call flow, something very specific happens in the brain. The brain goes through what researchers described as a clear triple shift. The first shift is time begins to melt. In flow, the sense of time starts to break down. Brain activity moves away from the neural beta waves, the ones linked to alertness and task-focused thinking, and shifts towards theta waves. Theta waves are the same patterns we see in light meditation and dreaming. Subjective time slows down dramatically. Research shows that during flow, the time you feel has passed can be off by as much as 40 to 60% compared to actual clock time. This echoes a Taoist line I've always loved. To enter stillness is to step into eternity. When your inner world becomes completely quiet, time itself seems to dissolve. And in that moment, you touch something timeless. The second shift, visual logic hyperlinking, is what neuroscientists call visual logic integration. the visual cortex and the brain's executive control network start firing together. This allows the musician or the creator to see complex structures without needing to explain them in words. Images, patterns, and actions merge into a single seamless process. When the DMN quiets down and full focus kicks in, you actually begin to see things differently. This isn't mysticism, it's a capacity we all have but rarely use. Think about Nikola Tesla describing how he could watch a machine run clearly in his mind before ever building it, or a designer rotating a fully imagined 3D object with your eyes closed, or Einstein visualizing the curvature of time through imagination. These aren't metaphors. They are the result of different parts of the brain lighting up together. Visual perception flows into abstract logic, which flows directly into creative output. In the Surangama Sutra, the Buddha said, 若能转物，则同如来. Which means when you are no longer pushed around by external conditions and instead can actively turn them, you are no different from a Buddha. This describes a shift from reactive consciousness to integrated agency, and it's exactly what's happening when the visual cortex, motor systems, and the executive logic network begin working in sync. When the brain stops being dragged by fear, noise, or habitual thought patterns, what we've been calling DMN dominance, and instead enters a state where perception and logic fully integrate, you regain authorship of your own experience. You stop being turned around by the world, and you begin turning the world around through your mind. That's what visual logic hyperlinking really is, not mysticism, but mastery. The third shift is called the ego falls silent. This one is also the deepest shift. In flow, the narrative self temporarily goes quiet. Activity in the DMN drops sharply. The inner voice that's always evaluating, criticizing, and commenting fades out. This voice is what we usually call the ego. You hear it when you are walking and it says, "My legs are sore." When you are panting and it whispers, "That color looks wrong." Even when you are doing nothing, it replays yesterday's awkward moment on a loop. In flow, that voice goes offline. There's no room left to ask, "Am I doing this right?" Or "What if I mess this up?" You are not playing the music anymore. You are the music. Scientists call this state transient hyperfrontality. Buddhists call it non-self. The Diamond Sutra captures it in one line, 因无所往而生其心, which means act from a heart that clings to nothing. This describes exactly what neuroscience sees in transient hyperfrontality. The brain stops attaching to thoughts, labels, memories, judgment, identities, and imagined futures. When the default mode network, the star of me, goes quiet, awareness stops fixating, not on who I am, not on how I'm performing, not on what might go wrong, not on yesterday's mistakes. The mind doesn't disappear. It simply stops cleaning. And the moment consciousness stops cleaning, it begins to flow. That's why creativity never comes from the ego. It appears the moment the ego finally steps out of the way. The Tai Chi rhythm, a dance between the DMN and focus. Let's be clear about one thing. The default mode network is not the enemy. Brain scans shows that even during deep flow, like jazz improvisation, the DMN doesn't completely shut off. Instead, it takes turn with the brain's focus network, what neuroscientists call the executive control system. These two systems switch back and forth roughly every 12 seconds in a rhythm that looks a lot like yin and yang. Inspiration mainly comes from the focus network. That's where free association happens. That's where scenes, images, and metaphors start forming. Technique, on the other hand, comes from the default mode network. Things like rhythm, timing, finger control, and logical progression are handled there. So real creative power doesn't come from being stuck in pure inspiration mode, and it doesn't come from being stuck in pure logical mode either. It comes from the movement between the two, like a musician shifting back and forth between surrender and control. In Taoist terms, this is described very simply. 万物负阴而抱阳，充气以为和, which means all things carry yin and hold yang. Creation happens through the exchange between them, intuition and structure, instinct and technique. It's only through this back and forth rhythm that higher intelligence start to emerge. So the goal is not to kill the default mode network. The goal is to learn how to work with it. Not to let it run your life all day, but also not trying to suppress it completely. When deep focus is needed, you let the DMN's autopilot step back. When open, associative thinking is needed, you let it come forward again. Most people's problem isn't that they have a default mode network, it's that they are stuck inside it. Learning how to shift between these two networks on purpose is the real foundation of mental mastery and sustainable creativity. Eastern philosophy saw the DMN 2000 years before neuroscience. The more I read Buddhist sutras and Taoist texts written more than 2000 years ago, the more something keeps clicking for me. When I go back and look at modern neuroscience, especially research on default mode network, the feeling gets stronger and stronger. They are describing the same thing. The Buddha once said, 志心一处，无事不办, which means when the mind is held steady in one direction, nothing is beyond reach. What this is really pointing to is very simple. If the mind can stay focused, a lot of things will remain out of reach. And the reason isn't mysterious. It's because the mind is constantly being pulled away by wandering thoughts. In Buddhism, this is described as thought that keeps drifting without awareness. And when you read modern neuroscience, it sounds very much like what the DMN does, generating constant background noise in the brain. Taoism puts it in a different way. 反者道之动，弱者道之用. The Tao moves by going in the opposite direction. In every terms, this means something very practical. When most people let the default mode network run their lives, they end up moving in the same direction. They worry about the same things. They doubt themselves in the same ways. They chase the same kinds of approval. And if you simply go along with that stream, you usually end up with the same results as everyone else. Real change requires going the opposite way. While others are anxious about the future, you bring your attention back to the present. While others choose careers based on expectation, you choose based on what you naturally enter flow. While others create from a sense of I'm not enough, you create from a sense of inner abundance. That act of reversing the current is how growth actually happens. Warren Buffett once said something similar in his own language. Be fearful when others are greedy, and greedy when others are fearful. Different field, same principle. The Surangama Sutra describes an uncontrolled mind in a way that feels almost identical to how neuroscience describes the DMN today. 想念无断，想象续生, which means thoughts arise one after another without interruption, forming an unbroken stream. To me, that reads like a near-perfect description of the default mode network. Without awareness, we're simply carried along by this non-stop stream of thought. Thoughts after thought, one following the next. And in this state, our actions, our decisions, and even our emotions aren't really chosen. They are driven by automatic pattern running in the background. 3 blades I use to disarm the default mode demon. I don't believe the DMN can or should be completely killed. As I mentioned earlier, it has evolutionary value. The point is not to animate it, but to ask, can you see it, name it, mute it when necessary, rather than letting it drag you around? For me, the most important shift over the past few years is that I slowly forged 3 spiritual blades. The first blade is called the blade of awareness. This first blade is about moving from being dragged around by fate to seeing exactly how I'm being dragged. In the beginning, all I did was meditate. And honestly, at first, meditation looked like this. The moment I sat down, my mind exploded. Unanswered messages, things I said wrong yesterday, worries about my child's future, startup stress, tiny physical discomforts I hadn't noticed all day. The more I wanted quiet, the louder everything became. At some point, I stopped trying to get rid of the thoughts. I dropped the idea that meditation was about making the mind quiet. Instead, I switched to one very simple practice. I stopped trying to control the DMN. I just sat there and watched it move. Watching anxiety rise like a fog. Watching the self-attack script play again. Watching that old pattern of needing to prove myself come back online. Every time I managed to step slightly outside the chaos in my head, even if it was only for 2 seconds, something changed. That tiny moment strengthened my ability to observe. And over time, I realized I could do this not just on the meditation cushion, but in real life. I started noticing things like, am I reaching for food because I'm hungry or because I'm emotionally overwhelmed? When I talk to my child, am I responding to him in front of me or to a wounded version of myself from the past? When I work hard, is it coming from genuine interest or from the default mode's need for safety and approval? From there, the practice one step further. Awareness wasn't just about noticing and observing anymore. It became about collecting what I noticed, organizing it, and actually changing small behaviors based on what I saw. To support this in daily life, I built an energy tracking system for myself. It allowed me to capture my internal state in real time. Over time, patterns started to show up very clearly. I could see when my default mode network was in charge and how that directly affected my behaviors and my energy. After different moments throughout the day, especially emotional spikes, I would log a few simple things. What charged me? What drained me? After which behaviors did my energy noticeably drop? After doing this for a while, one pattern became impossible to ignore. Whenever I was stressed, I almost automatically reached for sweets, especially cake. But after eating it, my energy dropped sharply. I began to notice something important. The cake didn't actually bring real pleasure to my body. It left me feeling heavy and uncomfortable. And once I truly saw that, the cake lost its grip on me. I went from eating cake almost every week to having it maybe once a month, or not at all. Not because I suddenly became more disciplined, but because I finally saw the script clearly and saw what it was doing to my energy. Because I experienced this shift firsthand, I eventually turned this energy tracking system into a tool others can use too. Awareness doesn't need to stay abstract or mystical. It can be recorded, it can be absorbed, it can be worked with. And through many small, concrete adjustments, those tiny changes add up. Over time, they become a current strong enough to change the direction of an entire life. The second blade is the blade of flow. Using what you truly love is one of the most effective ways to weaken the power of the default mode network. As I mentioned earlier, when you enter a real flow state, activity in the default mode network drops noticeably. The inner narrator, the one constantly telling a story about you, goes quiet for a while. For me, flow isn't just something that feels good, it's actually a form of self-protection. When I'm genuinely in flow, my brain simply doesn't have room left to manufacture all those fear-based scenarios. There's no space for endless worrying, imagining, or self-attacking. Naval once said that our real currency isn't time and it isn't money, it's attention. Wherever your attention goes, your life follows. And when you strip it down, flow is very simple. It's placing your full attention on something you genuinely care about. One of the biggest confusions people carry through their entire lives is that they've never seriously asked themselves a very basic question. What activity put me in flow naturally without effort? Instead, from a very young age, we're trained to ask a different set of questions. What's practical? What's safe? What's approved? What pays the most? And when you live that way, you're essentially letting the default mode network chooses your life for you. So the way to counter the brain's default mode network is actually quite simple. You observe which activities naturally bring you into flow, and you intentionally spend more time doing it. My own approach has completely flipped compared to traditional thinking. I no longer start with the question, what can I make money? I start with what puts me into the flow effortlessly. Only after that do I ask the next practical question. How can this become something that creates value and eventually income? This isn't avoiding reality, it's choosing a more efficient path, one that aligns with how you're actually wired. For example, imagine you discover that building Lego puts you into a deep state of focus and joy. On the surface, building Lego doesn't make money. It actually costs money to buy the bricks, and you guys know that Legos are not cheap. But you could start sharing your Lego creations. You could build a YouTube channel around them. Through consistent creation, expression, and connection, there often comes a point where attention gathers, and from there, income can emerge naturally. When your creative output is rooted in flow, something important changes. You get to spend more of your time doing what you genuinely love, and the positive cycle begins to form. You do what puts you in flow. You create results. You attract attention. You generate value. You earn income. And that income gives you more time to return to flow-based work. This is not a shortcut. It's actually how human beings were meant to live. The core problem in modern society is that most people choose their careers from the outside in. Family expectations, school systems, social approval, industrial salaries. The external structure dictates the internal direction. And this outside-in model almost always leads to the same outcome. Psychological exhaustion, emotional ups and downs, chronic self-doubt, low energy, because your most precious resource, which is your attention, is being spent on things that don't give your energy back. When life is built from the inside out, something very different happens. Flow becomes the center, genuine interest becomes the path, value creation becomes the connector, and business models come last. When you work this way, creativity appears naturally, action feels lighter, your energy stops leaking, it starts accumulating. And over time, it forms a way of creating and living that feels light, joyful, stable, and abundant. The third blade is called the blade of gratitude. There's one more important blade to defeat the control of default mode network, which is called the blade of gratitude. This is a very important blade. It's very simple, but also incredibly powerful. I didn't discover it through reading books. I found it almost by accident during many anxious early mornings that I had with a wave of anxiety. You probably know that feeling. Your heart is already racing. Your mind is running through every possible future that could go wrong. Your body doesn't want to move at all, but emotionally, you're already in free fall. That morning, instead of lying in bed and wrestling with my thoughts, I got up and did a short gratitude meditation. Less than 10 minutes, nothing complicated. I focus on very specific and small things to be thankful, such as I have food to eat, I have clothes to wear, I have bed to sleep on, and I'm still breathing. I can run, I can walk with my legs, and also I feel thankful for the people around me who are supportive, and also the people who gave me a lot of trouble in the past, and actually they helped me get tested to see who I really am. After about 10 minutes, something very magical happened. My anxiety completely disappeared. Not because my real life problems had magically disappeared, but because something shifted in my brain. I had moved out of the default mode network scarcity mode and into a different internal state. One that said, I already have enough. I'm already supported. From here, I can create. I'm abundant. The default mode network runs on a very specific belief, such as you are not enough, you need more, you have to try harder, you need to be safer, you need more approval, you need to be better. Gratitude runs on a completely different belief, such as I already have so much. I already live inside a structure that supports me. From this place, action becomes possible. That's why gratitude isn't about being positive or forcing yourself to feel good. It's a very clear signal to the brain. You're telling the default mode network in your brain, hey you don't get to run the show right now. From the brain's point of view, this is actually very simple. You are using an automatic pattern to interrupt and replace another automatic pattern. If this demon lives in your brain too, start with one small thing today. And if you're still watching now, you probably started to notice that there's something in your mind that keeps you pulling off course, something that feels a bit like a demon running in the background. I want to suggest starting with one very small step today. After everything we've talked about, if there's only one thing worth remembering, it's this. You are not your thoughts. You are not your anxiety. You've just been living under the default mode network for a long time. To help you take the driver's seats back, I'm hosting a 3-day challenge in our community. This isn't a course and it's not complicated. It's a simple, concrete practice you can actually do. Think of it as a small win, something you can finish. For 3 days, we repeat the same 3 steps every day. First, catch the trigger. In a moment, you feel a pull, a craving, the urge to scroll the app, or a sudden spike of anxiety. Pause for 3 to 5 minutes. Don't try to fix anything, just notice what started running. Treat it like something you're observing from the outside. Second, identify the behavior. Where is that script trying to take you? Endless scrolling? Emotional eating? A loop of self-criticism? Third, track the energy. After the behavior happens, write one simple sentence. What just happened? Did my energy go up or did it go down? We'll do this together once a day for 3 days. I've already shared my own daily logs in the community, including the patterns and energy leaks I'm noticing, so you can see exactly how I'm doing this in real life. You are welcome to share yours too. This is a space for noticing and for supporting each other as these patterns become clear. If you decide to join this 3-day practice, this doesn't have to be just another video you watched and moved on from. It can be the starting point of a different relationship with your own mind. And from there, things can begin to shift. If you want to try it, the link to the 3-day practice is below. I will see you in the community. We'll work through this together.